A friend and I were hiking not far from downtown Salt Lake City in July 2014. After a while, we decided to rest a bit. It was around 5:15 p.m. Since the trail was narrow and crowded with bush, we left the trail to rest under some very tall fir trees, where the bushes were less thick, but it was still shady. July in Salt Lake is close to 100 degrees. As I was leaning on a stump, I noticed that we were standing among several trees that formed a teepee shape. As we were noticing and discussing it, I heard a loud crash and then a twig snap a few yards in front of me. My back was to the trail, so I was facing a hillside and deeper forest growth, while my friend was facing the trail with his back towards the hillside. The trees in the teepee formation were to my right, about 10 feet, and where my friend was facing them and the trail. So my head was turned about 90 degrees when I heard the commotion coming from the base of the hillside. I immediately looked toward the sound and saw a hominid covered with dark brown hair moving quickly behind the thick bushes. He wasn't more than 6-ish feet tall, and I didn't get a good look at his face because he turned and moved so quickly. I noticed that his hair was two-toned, with the darker hair on his head and shoulders, and the lighter hair on his midriff. His legs appeared darker. I shouted, "Did you see that?" to my friend while trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The last time I saw someone tromping through the bushes in that area was in the early spring. There were 2 ex-country skiers coming back down the mountain. The one in front was wearing a blue jacket with the typical two-tone dark gray shoulder pattern. So for some reason, it was the first explanation that my brain came up with for what I was seeing there in July. I mean, I could clearly recall the hairy creature, but at the same time, my brain was refusing to believe it and was trying to come up with a scenario for the situation. All it could muster was a skier hiking through the forest, not on the trail, but fully dressed in dark ski clothes from head to toe in July. At any rate, I then began to call out, "Hello, hello, hey, hello," while also trying to listen for the direction of his retreat between my calls. My friend ran up to the spot, see if he could see anything. He had only seen a blur by the time he had turned all the way around to see what had made the sound, so he wasn't sure what we were looking for. Even though it was only a few short yards to the spot where I saw our skier, there was nothing there. I regained my senses and ran to see if there were any tracks. I found one, but it resembled more of the kind of print you'd find in deep sand, more of a dugout type of depression in the needles. I measured it from side to side, and it was about an inch longer and wider on each side than the size 11 Chaco sandals I was wearing. I hadn't heard any crashing through the bushes after the initial noise that grabbed my attention, so I was unable to determine what had happened to the skier after it had passed behind the bushes. There were small green plants covering the ground in the direction he went, but they were only compressed and then quickly ran out at the edge of a very small and gentle ravine running back up the hill. We scanned for tracks, but I didn't feel like pursuing into the deeper brush or up the ravine, so we went back to the trail. Oddly, neither of us felt threatened in the least, and although the valley we were hiking up was very narrow, we just continued up the trail in the same direction our furry friend had gone. We thought we heard movement up the hillside a few times, and from various directions, but still never felt threatened. After an hour or so of high awareness hiking, we turned back so we wouldn't get caught up there after sundown. After giving it some thought, I found it highly suspicious that the creature had absconded so quickly through the brush, without any noise except for the initial crash. I wonder now if the noise was a deliberate attempt to get our attention, not as a trap, but rather as an alert, a sort of, "Hey, we're here. Please respect our space." I'm never going to hike there alone again, that's for sure, but I'm definitely going back up there with a friend or two. I'd like to look for more indications of an individual or family group. If a group has moved in, I'd like to know. Otherwise, I might assume it was an itinerant male just passing through.
Pasted from a comment I wrote on another post in September 2011. Only change is that the boyfriend is now my husband. 2 nights ago, my boyfriend went to take the dogs out back. My one dog started barking like crazy right away. My BF had a flashlight and quickly scanned the grass line where the woods start, where we normally see deer. Our house is bordered by woods. Something made him shine a bit higher, and he sees two eyes staring back at him, about 9 feet off the ground. As my BF tries to hurry the dogs back inside, he sees the thing turn and casually walk back into the woods. Like a man, with arms and shoulders. I have never seen my BF so freaked out. He came inside and closed every single window and all the blinds and refuses to let the dogs out in the backyard at night anymore. In hindsight, there have been a few instances in the past few weeks that we can't explain, like dogs' toys being down by the woods with bites taken out. But it was the placement of the toys and whatnot that makes us wonder. Also, a grunt snort noise we heard recently. My BF cannot get over the size of this thing and the fact that the eyes were so high off the ground. I asked him if he thought he saw Bigfoot, and he said after a minute or so of silence, "If I wasn't a believer before, I sure as hell am one now." We moved away the next summer, but just moved back into the house June 1st. I have a trail cam posted in the yard, but have yet to get anything on it. We live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, near the Michigan-Wisconsin border.
When she was a teenager, my mom's family lived on the edge of the North Georgia mountains, near Canton. They kept a few chickens in the backyard for eggs and meat, I guess, and the birds slept in a small chicken coop at the very rear of their backyard. Apparently, their property backed up to some pretty thick woods, the edge of which was some distance from the co-op itself. My grandmother was a tiny lady, barely 5 feet tall. My mom was only 5'4" as an adult. I'm not sure why that was important for me to tell you. I'm also not sure why all farm husbandry takes place at the crack of dawn. But it was just breaking daylight when they went out to gather the eggs from the hens. Apparently the hen house was 20 feet from the hens. Apparently the hen house was 20 feet from their back porch or door. My mom said that my grandmother had become uneasy about going out to the co-op on her own, which is why she was out there with her. Her mom was gathering the eggs when my mom said she didn't feel right but didn't know why. As she was looking around, she says she saw 2 big eyes like coals of fire back in the tree line, way up in the tree. She pointed this out to her mom, who then promptly rushed her toward the house. Mom remembered looking back, trying to see what it was, or maybe see if it was chasing them, but all she saw before her mom drug her inside was a huge man standing just on the edge of the woods, and that was it. They never saw or heard anything like that again. She told me this reluctantly after we watched the $6 Million Man episode with Bigfoot when I was a kid. I asked her what she meant when she said she saw a huge man, and she said that to her. It looked just like a very tall, very wide man with hair all over. She specifically said he had a face just like the Bigfoot ensemble, which of course was Andre the Giant in a partial costume. I took that to mean human, like. Beyond that, she wouldn't talk about it. She said it was bad luck to talk about some things. Anyway, that's the story that originally made me give the subject my attention. I thought you might enjoy it.
Bigfoot Encounter. Owen. What I am about to tell all of you is very real. It happened in the fall of 2003 and has left a mark on me ever since. It was a Friday, and the only reason I remember it being a Friday is because I used to have friends over during that particular time on Friday evenings. We used to play video games and do other things that typical teenage boys used to do, but that's neither here nor there. My friends and I were immensely interested in the paranormal, and during times of boredom or spontaneous adventure, we liked to wander around the woods behind my mom's house, which is still standing to this very day. These woods were typical woods, dark, forbidden, and creepy at night. Nothing was ever expected to be seen or heard in these woods. We just liked to scare ourselves. It was fun. Fun, until after exiting the woods on that particular Friday night in the fall of 2003. As we were walking away from the woods, we saw a dark figure walking in the darkness of a shadow cast by a telephone pole. Not until the figure moved out of the shadow did we see that it wasn't just a random man walking around at midnight on a Friday night. It was something else. This creature was walking as fast as any human could run. Its giant step span was a dead give. Away. This was not a human, once we noticed that it was something other than a fellow man or any animal that we've ever seen. We spread all the way back to my mom's house. That was the first and last time I ever saw this creature, but it was not my last encounter with it. That is, for another time. Though. Thank you, and good night. Bigfoot, Encounter 2. Sorry to those who were wanting an all-inclusive thread in regards to my Bigfoot encounter. But this is more convenient for the sake of length. These stories, you see, might not be entirely connected because my second encounter with Bigfoot was hard to tell this time around. It was 2006, and this time around, it was in the pitch blackness of the woods. 3 of us daringly set out to experience the presence of Bigfoot once again. This was not our first time back in the woods since the first meeting, nor was it the first time looking for the creature again. Our group started out as 5, but as soon as we hit the woods, 2 cowardly bowed out. We entered the woods with a flashlight and nothing more. It was the middle of the summer and very dark inside the woods due to the thickness of the brush. After walking rather cautiously for about 20 minutes, we reached deeper and deeper into the woods. Once we came upon a small stream within the woods, we heard something else among us. A loud crash sounded directly in front of us, terrified that we had been spotted by whatever was with us in the woods. We all immediately whispered to turn the flashlight off. Standing there in the dark, we heard the noise again, a very loud crash. The sound of something metal hitting something else. A very odd sound for it to be heard in the middle of the woods. After about a minute of these loud crashes, the worst thing happened. It got quiet. It was so horrifying, standing there in the middle of the woods in the dark, silent, and standing so very close to this beast. The dead gave away that it wasn't a human with the piercing low growl it emitted after another minute of silence. We could feel the breath of this creature as it snarled at us. We were that close. To say that we ran would be an understatement, totally disregarding the trail. We all split up, escaping to the outside. Once we were out of the woods, we did not look back. We continued to run all the way home. This was my last encounter with the fiend, whatever it may have been. For the sake of classification, it matched very well with other Bigfoot descriptions, so I decided to call it Bigfoot. As I've said before, the beast in the first encounter could have been entirely different, but the events were so similar that, in my mind, it was the same. I have been back to those woods many, many times after this encounter, and I still have yet to experience anything else. Occasionally we hear noises, but nothing significant enough to call an encounter. Thank you, and good night.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more scary stories.